So today I want to talk about a fantastic book that I read a few months ago, and that is The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. This is a book that I cannot recommend enough to anyone who considers himself to be a creative in whatever field it may be. Whatever kind of art form you're creating in, be that film, TV, some form of music, writing, art. Creating is very difficult, and it comes with a lot of anxiety, it comes with a lot of frustrations, it comes with many, many, many times where you're feeling lost in your mind, in your craft, and not really understanding what to do. The Creative Act is a wonderful, wonderful toolkit to kind of push you in the right direction and remind you about why it is that us as creatives do what we do, and how we can channel that creativity in the right way to create whatever form of art we are creating. While I do feel that you as a creative should pick up this book right away, I do want to touch on 4 points that kind of stood out to me. But to be honest with you, the entire book is fantastic, and I really can't recommend it enough. Read it from beginning to end. One chapter where Rick Rubin really hits the nail on the head is where he talks about how creativity and creatives are really trying to tap into the unseen. I really feel like there's a distinction between artists and people who are creative and non-artists who might see the world differently. Creatives really do look at the world in a very different way. And one thing this book seeks to remind us is that creatives are really trying to look out there for something that is untangible, something that is hard to describe, something that exists between realities almost. Essentially, what creatives are trying to grab onto is something in the unseen. And essentially what creatives are trying to do is transcend this physical realm that we exist in. When an artist or creative steps out to create art from a sincere place, what they're really trying to do is put their hands out between the lines, between the curtains of reality, and grab something that is greater, more powerful, more impactful than this physical world we see around us. And that is why the most impactful art reaches that place in our souls and gives us something that we can't describe, that we can't fathom. That's hard sometimes to put into words. Essentially, it's an important reminder that every creative needs to have that spiritual side to him or her in order to translate something that's ethereal, translate something that's beyond description into a form of art that can help inspire that in others. Another great chapter that Rick puts in this book is The Opposite is True. And it's a really wonderful perspective to have. And I think every creative has gone through this at some point in their creative career. Sometimes when you spend years doing things a certain way, it's worthwhile to look at the opposite way of doing it and seeing if that is also an interesting way to reapproach your art. As artists, we are constantly looking at reinventing our art, reinventing the way we look at art and taking our art to new levels. And sometimes the best way to do that is to look at the opposite way of the way we are creating art and peer onto that side and wonder if perhaps that is the way we should be producing that art. And what's nice and what the book reminds us is it's not always that going the opposite way about creating the art is the way to go, but looking over to that side and pondering on if perhaps that is the way to reapproach your art, or just seeing how it works and seeing how it might work if you were to do something completely differently to the way you're doing it now. That itself might inspire you to do something in a different way. Essentially, when you spend years creating art a certain way, sometimes flipping that method of creating your art and flipping that way that you look at art might unveil a whole new dimension to your art entirely. Another part of the book, and perhaps my biggest takeaway from this book, is a reminder that, and a kick in the teeth that every creative needs to hear, which is about success. And I'm just going to read you some of the words that Rick writes. He says, success has nothing to do with variables outside yourself. I'll repeat that again. Success has nothing to do with variables outside yourself. To move forward is an aspect of success. This happens when we finish work, share it, and begin a new project. One of the biggest challenges that creatives who share their art will know very well is that sometimes the idea of perception can really get to you. How well does your art do? If you make a movie or you write a book or you do a painting, how well has it done? How many copies has it sold? How many likes has it got on Instagram, for example? How much has it impacted the culture? As artists, we are constantly in a battle, and that battle is between what we really want to create deep down and how we think the art might be perceived or interpreted by others, and whether or not that art will be as impactful as we want it to be. Like it or not, for many artists, sharing their art is a big part of producing their art. Some artists, and I know many, are very happy with, writing or painting or whatever and just putting it on the side, leaving it in their house and not showing it to the world. But for others, including myself, sharing is a big part of the art because it's the way we serve. It's the way we share ourselves almost into the world. We have a certain quality about us that is not unlike light. We want that light to shine. And we want that light to shine in the best way possible. And using that metaphor, sometimes you're too focused on how that light may shine onto others. You're too focused on how people might interpret that light. But in reality, the best way to shine is to shine your light as it is. And therefore, as creators, we really need to separate ourselves from the perception and how our art is perceived. That does not mean that you do not take into account how art can impact people and what the best way to share your art is and what the best way to construct your art is in such a way where it can have the most impact on others. But I think it's a super fine line between thinking about how you can impact others in the best way possible and how you can also keep your art as true to yourself. Essentially, we as creatives need to measure our success in one thing and one thing only, and that is the piece of art itself. We create it, we share it into the world, and we offer it, just as Rick says, as an offering to God and as an offering to this world. Now, how far the art goes is not up to us. It's up to God, it's up to the world, and it's up to how the world works. Many times I've written poetry or created videos that I felt and sometimes still feel were of some of the best work that I've done, but I haven't seen it gone far. Other times I've created work or written poetry that I feel isn't as deep or as impactful as that work, but I've seen it go very far, beyond my expectations. The conclusion there is that how far any artist's work goes is really not in their hands. It's not up to you. All you can do and the only thing you control and the only thing you should focus on is creating the art itself. Once that project has been complete and once it has been shared, that is your definition of success. No amount of engagement, no amount of likes, no amount of attention, and no amount of money or anything else should be a barometer for you feeling success or not. Creatives create for the sake of creation, and that should be your only barometer for success. And the final wonderful lesson that I want to share from this book, and as I mentioned there are many, is of self-awareness. And I'm going to end with the quote from this chapter on self-awareness, where Rick says, self-awareness allows us to listen to what's going on in the body and notice the energetic changes that either pull us forward or push us away. Our definition of self-awareness as artists relates directly to the way we tune into our inner experience, not the way we are externally perceived. The more we identify with the self, with ourself as it exists through the eyes of others, the more disconnected we become and the less energy we draw from. We extend our reach for a higher consciousness, releasing attachment to our perceived self and limitations. We are seeking not to define ourselves, but to expand ourselves, to tune into our limitless nature and connection to all that is. Self-awareness is transcendence, an abandonment of ego, a letting go. It is undeniable that the one challenge and one battle that every creative and every artist needs to face is the battle with themselves. The truest art comes from the truest place. And to create the truest art, you need to delve deep down and delve into yourself and figure out who the hell you are. And that, like it or not, is not an easy battle. But the more you become self-aware, the more you tune into yourself, the more you transcend, and the more you let go. That place of contentment, that place of self-acceptance, and that place of self-forgiveness is the purest, cleanest place to create art from. We all know that saying, what comes from the heart goes to the heart. And as creatives, if our motive and our ultimate goal is to impact other people's hearts with what's inside our own hearts, then we need to delve into those hearts and make sure we understand exactly what's going on there. As creatives, as artists, each of us is unique. Each of us has our own way of looking at the world. Each of us has our own light to share. And the more we understand ourselves, the more we understand that light, and the more we understand what we have to offer that's different to everyone else, the more our art can be as impactful as possible. And the more our art will be true because it's truest to ourselves. Those are just a few lessons I wanted to share that I picked up from this book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being. But as I mentioned, from beginning to end, this book is full of gems. There's a lot in this book that we as creatives already know, and there's a lot of rules in this book that we as creatives already know that we should live by, but refuse to for whatever reasons. And I think the book is a great reminder to us as creatives who kind of already understand that we are somewhat different in the way we look at the world. And the reason for that is that we produce art to impact the world. Ultimately, being creative is indeed a way of being. It's not just a career. It's not just something you do as a hobby. Rather, it is something that you become, you as an artist. And I think in order to make the most of that God-given responsibility and that God-given talent, we need to lean into it and understand it as much as possible in order to create art that is truest to ourselves and thus shines our own light into the world in the best way possible. That's it from me. Buy the book, like, subscribe, comment, please. I'll see you next week, hopefully.